I gotta tune this, Kenzie. The sweetest music this side of Dante's Inferno, coming your way coast to coast. And there's no question about it that all of us are being burned up with those strange, divergent emotions, both applauding the new year and weeping the old year as it quietly disappears. And the new one begins to... It'll take me well into July to stop writing 1965 on my checks. Well into July. You know, I've often wondered, seriously, at what point does, well, that's something that I've often wondered about. I've had a feeling that if you wake up some old codgers at 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake him up, you come in, this is the old guy laying there, and he's asleep in his sack, his monastic pallet, and he's got gray hair, and he's got grizzled brow. And you come in there and you wake up. Hey, Ebenezer! Hey, wait! Eb, come on, Ebenezer, wake up there, Ebenezer! Yeah, well, what's going on here? Hey, come on, Ebenezer! What year is it? 1907. I really do. I believe that some people, at a certain point in their life, they all years that come on are not official years. They're phony years. And they're not real years. And each year that comes, as they go quicker and quicker and faster and more swirling into that great, fantastic abyss of time, each one of these new years is looked upon as one of these, is it Johnny come lately, Jim Crack year? Why, what kind of a year is 1966? It's ridiculous. Doesn't even sound right. Now, let me tell you, 1933. Now, there's a year. That sounds like a year, 1930. You know, I once talked to, in fact, I talked to a guy who told me a wild story about the greatest, most fantastic New Year that he ever was involved in. And it was the kind of New Year that comes once every 100 years. It was the turn of the century. And I imagine there are some guys listening right now tonight who remember the turn of the century, who remember when they first wrote 1900 instead of 1899. And there was a tremendous, there was a great national wild scene that occurred. In fact, it occurred all over the world, you know, that when the year 1900 came in, many prophets had said, and that was with a PH there, many prophets had said, and I see the end of the century will also mean the end of the world as we know it. And thousands of people really sat in their homes, hanging on to the furniture, waiting for the end of the world to come just as it struck midnight. Now, on the other hand, there was a great group of people who felt when the new century came in, that it would usher in a fantastic, new, indescribably wonderful life. It would just be, just would go on and just never stop. Of course, naturally, they had no concept that the 20th century, and I suspect that ultimately the 20th century will go down in history as the century of the great wars. I think that by the time the 20th century is over, more people will have died in battle, will have died as the result of wars, one way or another, in one kind or another, than all the centuries combined. As a matter of fact, I think somewhere along the line I read a statistic. Now, I can be very wrong on this. I can be definitely corrected. But I gained the impression that I heard that as of about 1960, already. More people had died from wars in the 20th century than all the period of all the history preceding our time. And I have a feeling that this century will go down as the century of the fantastic great wars. And so these guys living at the year 2000 or the year 1900, there were two groups of people. One of them said that the world is ending. This is going to be it. And the other group said that the world is going to be fantastic. It's going to be the greatest world that man has ever seen. and I suppose a lot of people still think that the 20th century is the greatest century that man has ever known. Of course, that could be called century ego or time ego. I suspect that any century that any guy is alive in, he believes that it's the greatest century that man has ever known. He has to, you know, in one way. On the other hand, you're torn by this conflicting emotion that says, oh boy, what a rotten time. Wow. That's why I suspect that we read the historical novels and see historical movies and historical plays. The men of past time always seem to have more passion than the men of now. You know, it's the Tom Jones syndrome. That somehow the guys of that time ate more, they lusted more, and they swung with chicks more, and they hollered more, and they holler when they drink the ale. Evil, bang boy! Wow. Well, I don't know. I suspect it may be just us looking back on that time. I'm sure a guy of that period looking around, he figured, it's not like the old days. Boy, the 13th century, that one really went. And so, who knows, you know? But the literature on New Year's and the New Year coming in is a fascinating thing to run into and to be part of, to read, because we're all part of time. That's the one thing that all men have in common. Of course, this is the greatest of all cliches, but it's often such a great cliche that you forget about it. You know, we talk about the world today. You hear it more and more said that the world belongs to youth, or that the young today it's as though they're a special breed. You see, it's as though they have some kind of they're like Tasmanians or something. You know, it's a special nationality or something. Youth. Well, this is one of the great illusions. And as a matter of course, it's a fact that the one thing that none of us can ever escape is that fantastic ocean of time. A friend of mine, a cartoonist, Robert Osborne, used to write me letters all the time. And underneath every letter, he'd write these wild letters, and under the letter he would always write, beware of the great thief. And he was talking about time, the great thief. And he would always write it on every letter. He didn't write sincerely, Charlie. He didn't write, have a good day, Bob. He just wrote, beware of the great thief. And you'd get one of his letters and, wow. And I should tell you the story about my friend who saw the year come in. He was living in Philadelphia. I mean, the year 1900. He saw it come in. And he was living in Philadelphia, and he was in his 20s at the time. And he heard all this fantastic crosstalk going on that the world was going to end and the world was going to be great. Then there was a tremendous amount of editorializing about this, you know, a new century. And not every generation experiences a new century, as a matter of fact. And so the day that it came, he said he remembers that it was a kind of a gray, cold, dreary day, and it was raining a little bit, and it was 1899. It was the last day of the ancient century. It was the century of Napoleon. It was the century of a lot of fantastic things that had happened. The century of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln. It was the century that saw Queen Victoria. It was the century of all the fantastic characters of the 19th century world. And there were editorials, people writing about it for months beforehand. And there was fear. There were all the churches were open that night. And there were great sermons being preached. People walking around the streets, clinging to one another. There was fear and all that. And then suddenly he says he'll never forget, it was midnight. And everyone sat there for a minute. And they were still there, you know. Aunt Minnie was still sitting in the corner in her bad leg. And Uncle Fred was still sitting over there chewing his tobacco and spitting on the floor. And it was suddenly the 20th century instead of the 19th. It was the 20th century. They sat there for a couple of minutes, and then he says you could hear the church bells ringing out all over the city, everybody yelling and hollering. They poured out into the streets. And he said it was probably the biggest mass riot that the country had ever seen. It was just wild, insane sights on the year 1900 when it came in. And he said he will always remember that because of the great fear that it was going to be the last day. A lot of people thought that this was the end of it. It had been building up. And I'm sure that there are a lot of guys listening tonight who will see the year 2000 come in. The year 2000, can you imagine how wild it must be to write 2000 on your checks? There's a lot of guys still alive, still listening, probably tonight, who saw 1900 come in. And these two groups of people are still walking around. They're still talking. Well, no wonder there's so many superstitions about New Year's. Is this a thing that happens in the East at all? Have you ever heard of the pickled herring superstition in the East? Did you ever hear that one? I think that's a superstition, not a superstition, a custom, really, I should say. It's a custom that came out of Middle Europa. And I remember as a kid, my grandmother was sitting around, she's passing out the little thimblefuls of bad wine. The only time she would let anybody drink wine in her house was on New Year's, and it was a New Year's night, and in about 10 minutes it would be the New Year, and the radio was playing. They always had the radio on. Somehow the radio played an important part when I was a kid in New Year's. And whoopee parties. My mother and father, all I remember is one succession of New Year's after another with a babysitter. Or with my grandmother. All the cousins would be at the grandmother's house, and all the aunts and uncles and the whole crowd would be off somewhere having this big whoopee party for New Year's. And quite often it was a costume party. I remember my mother would always dress like a clown. You don't see that. But my grandmother, with all the kids sitting around, she would say, well, it's time for New Year's now, and it's 10 minutes to midnight, and she would give us this little tiny thimbleful of wine, and she would come out with this plate of pickled herring, and we were all supposed to be eating pickled herring or something, eating pickled herring when the New Year came in, and that meant good luck to everybody. That if you ate pickled herring on New Year's, it was going to be nothing but, peaches and cream for the next year. That's what they believed. And so New Year's had all kinds of, and it's always been that way. And would you like to hear some New Year literature? I mean, some guys that have really written about it. This is here. Let's get this one out here. How about Robert Service? His great poem New Year's Eve. Before we go into this, let's give the last one for the year. This is WOR AM and FM New York. Hit the little button there. Get that whoopee stuff going, man.
Here's a real whoopee for you. This is WPAI in New York. Except no substitute.
There's only one champagne of bottled beer. Sparkling, flavorful, distinctive. Miller High Life. Brewed only in Milwaukee from a century-old recipe, Miller High Life has a rich heritage and tradition. A bright, clear taste. Unequaled, unquestioned, unchanging. Available on tap, in cans, and in the familiar crystal clear bottle. Miller High Life is always sparkling, flavorful, distinctive. Enjoy Miller High Life yourself.
Miller High Life, the champagne of bottled beer.
Yes, Miller High Life, the champagne of bottled beer.
Yeah, I'm going to leave my resolutions for the next show. Yeah, I've got a whole set of them. I've been compiling them now for the last 6 or 7 weeks, very seriously. And just to give you a little clue, in the coming year, I'm not going to be a smart guy. I'm going to be I'm going to give the time a lot. The next year, I'm going to give the time, and I'm going to play a lot of good music and be very nice. And before we go into that, we'll have to do a commercial. I'm going to practice doing them very seriously. You know, I have a trouble with that. But a funny look comes in my eye when I give a commercial. But we have with us tonight Rover. And I hope that you will drive throughout the next year in a brand new Rover 2000. If nothing else, it'll mean that you'll be driving one of the great cars of the world. And also, you will be driving one of the safest automobiles in the world. If you'd like to try to get through 1966, or whatever the heck year it is, if you would like to get through 1966 and still have a whole pelvis, I would like to suggest you investigate the Rover 2000. Considered one of the safest automobiles ever built and one of the most beautiful and one of the best designed cars to come out and off the drawing boards in many, many a year. It's a beautiful car. It's the Rover 2000, and if you would like to see a picture of it, we'd be glad to send you a little brochure that's in 4 colors and just sings there. Send your name and address to Rover. That's what they call me here, Rover, and I got the itch. That's Rover in care of WOR, 1440 Broadway, and we'll be sure that then, by the way, you'll get the itch once you take a look at this thing. Oh, wow, man. All right, now let us return. Oh, before we do this, we will be at the Limelight tomorrow night in full fettle. In fact, I've been having my fettles cleaned all week. For this particular program, we will follow the opera at the Limelight immediately following the big opera. What is it, Aida? Is it Aida? Madam Butterfly. How fitting to celebrate the year going out with a tear-jerker of the first water. And I will follow that, and I will tell you the famous story of how my Uncle Carl lost his false teeth 10 minutes after the new year came in and did not find them till the next day. And the denouement where he found them is even funnier, sadder, and more tragic. So if you'd like to have a big New Year's Day, let's get it off great. We'll be at the Limelight, and incidentally, we will follow on the air immediately after the opera, but we will be doing a live show before that at the Limelight itself. And now back to reality. Okay, would you please give me my low-down, knocked-out blues? Just lay it in there, man, because there's no question about it. We are all torn by those two conflicting emotions, celebrating a year that's coming in and regretting a year that's going out, a year lost irretrievably. This is Robert Service, writing in the year 1903. My glass is filled, my pipe is lit, my den is all a cozy glow, and snug before the fire I sit, and wait to feel the old year go. I dedicate to solemn thought amid my 2 unthinking days this sober moment, sadly fraught with much of blame, with little praise. Old year, upon the stage of time you stand to bow your last adieu. A moment, and the prompter's chime will ring the curtain down on you. Your mien is sad, your step is slow, you falter as a sage in pain. Yet, turn, old year, before you go, and face your audience just once more, once again. That sphinx-like face, remote, austere, let us all read, whate'er the cost. Oh, maiden, why that bitter tear? Is it for a dear one you've lost? Is it for fond illusion gone in the last year? For trusted lover proved untrue? Oh, sweet-faced girl, so sad, so wan, what hath the old year meant to you? And you, oh neighbor on my right, so sleek, so prosperously clad, what see you in that aged white that makes your smile so gay and glad? What opportunity unmissed? What golden gain? What pride of place? What splendid hope? Oh, optimist, do you read in that withered face? And you, deep shrinking in the gloom, what find you in that filmy gaze? What menace of a tragic doom? What dark, condemning yesterdays? What urge to crime? What evil done What cold, confronting shape of fear? O haggard, haunted, hidden one, what see you in the dying year? And so from face to face I flit, the countless eyes that stare and stare, some with approbation lit, and some are shadowed with despair. Some show a smile, and some a frown, some joy and hope, some pain and woe. Enough. Oh, ring the curtain down, old weary year, it's time to go. My pipe is out, my glass is dry, my fire is almost ashes too. But once again, before you go, and I prepare to meet the new old year, a parting word that's true. For we've been comrades, you and I thank God for each day of you. There, bless you now, old year. Goodbye. It's not bad, is it? That was Robert Service writing in 1903. That's the same guy who wrote The Face on the Barroom Floor. Do you want to hear another Robert Service, more in the tradition of Robert Service? He's fine. I'll tell you, when it comes to celebrating New Year's, you can't beat Service. Bring on a little more of that rotten ragtime music. This is Robert Service writing in the year 1897. Oh, it's cruel, cold on the waterfront, silent and dark and drear. Only the black tide weltering, only the hissing snow, and I alone like a storm-tossed wreck on this night of the glad New Year, shuffling along in the icy wind, ghastly and gaunt and slow. They're playing a tune. You can hear it now. They're playing a tune in McGuffey's saloon. It's cheery and bright in there. God, I'm weak. Since the bitter dawn, never a bite of food. I'll just go over and slip inside. I mustn't give way to despair. Perhaps I can bum a little booze. The boys are feeling good. They'll jeer at me. They'll sneer at me. They'll call me a whiskey soak. Have a drink. Well, thank you kindly, sir. I don't mind if I do. A driveling, dirty gin joint fiend, the butt of the barroom joke, sunken, sodden, and hopeless. Another? Well, here's to you. Yeah, I see him now. Old McGuffey is showing a bunch of the boys how Bob Fitzsimmons hit. The barman is talking to Tammany Hall, and why the ward boss got fired. I'll just sneak into a corner. They'll let me alone a bit. And the room is reeling round and round. God, I'm tired. I'm tired. Roses she wore on her breast that night. Oh, their scent was sweet. Alone we sat on the balcony, and the fan palms arched above. The witching strain of a waltz by Strauss came up to our cool retreat. And I prisoned her little hand in mine, and I whispered my plea of love. And then sudden the laughter died on her lips, and lowly she bent her head. And oh, there came in the deep, dark eyes a look that was heaven to see, and the moments went. And I waited there, and never a word was said. And then she plucked from her bosom a rose of red, and shyly gave it to me. Then the music swelled to a crash of joy, and the lights blazed up like day, and I held her fast to my throbbing heart, and I kissed her bonny brow. She's mine forevermore, the violins seemed to say, and the bells were ringing the new year in. God, I can hear him now. Don't you remember that long last waltz with its sobbing, sad refrain? Don't you remember that last goodbye and the dear eyes dim with tears? Don't you remember that golden dream with never a hint of pain, of lives that would blend like an angel's song in the bliss of the coming years? What have I lost? What have I lost? Oh, forgive. The red rose is faded now, and it's 50 years ago. 'Twere better to die 1,000 deaths than to live each day as I live. I've sinned, I've sunk to the lowest depths, but I've suffered. Hark, I can hear the bells. Look, I can see her there, fair as a dream. It fades. Now I can hear the hum of the crowded court. Look, the judge is looking down. Not guilty, I swear. The bells. I can hear the bells again. Ethel. I come, Ethel. Get up, old man. It's 12 o'clock. You can't sleep here, you know. Come on, get up. Say, ain't you got no sentiment? Come on, lift up your muddled head. Have a drink to the new year. Come on. Come on, now drop before you... That darn old dirty... Hey! My God, boys. Look, he's dead. He's dead, boys. That was, wow. Wow. He pulls out all the stops, doesn't he? That was, Robert Service, 1897. Now, do you want to hear another view? How much time do we have? We got plenty of time. You want to hear another view of New Year's? This is to me, this is one of my favorites. This is George Ade, and this was written in 1899. And this was just before that big New Year. And as a matter of fact, there is talk that Ade wrote it to spike the ideas that everybody had at that time that the year 1900 would bring the millennia. This is called The Fable of Successful Tobias and some of his happy New Years. A little music. I think just a little touch of that low-down, dragged-out music. That blues. That rotten, raunchy, stinky, hairy blues. Da-da-da-da-dee-dee-dee-dee. Oh, yeah. Once there was a financial heavyweight. The milestones... Listen to this beautiful line. Once there was a financial heavyweight. The milestones of whose busy life were strung back across the valley of tribulation into the green fields of childhood. Like most of our aristocrats, he got his start out among the corn rows. His youth was spent very happily, but he did not get on to the fact until years later. He used to work 14 hours per for his board and his clothes, and his only dissipation was to take in the Swiss bell ringers once every year. At the close of each year, on New Year's, he was permitted to attend a watch meeting at the Mount Zion Church. The watch meeting is a form of gaiety invented a long time ago by someone who was not feeling well at the time. The outfit were supposed to sit for 3 or 4 hours on the hard benches, meditating on all the low-down, ornery things that they had done during the old year. Some of them had to hurry in order to crowd this line of meditation into a brief 4 hours. Now and then, a local high guy with throat whiskers would arise and talk for a short time on the subject of death, and wonder how many of those present would be taken in by the Grim Reaper during the next year. Just at midnight, the sexton would toll the bell so as to cheer everyone up. And then each of the merrymakers would go home and eat a piece of mince pie and a bellflower apple and retreat to the feathers, feeling a little ashamed for having stayed up so late. Later on, after Tobias moved into town and began to wear store clothes and stand-up collars and put oil on his hair, he encountered another kind of New Year's Day. The era was that of the open house. All the women received, and the men went over the entire circuit and traded job-printed cards for something to eat and drink. This made it fine for those who were not ordinarily invited into the best homes. The men roamed about in great flocks, and usually they had a hard finish, for it was customary in those good old days of democratic simplicity for every true gentleman to take a drink when it was proffered by the hand of a lovely woman. And lovely women seemed to regard it as her assignment to put all of the nice young fellows to the bad on New Year's. It was customary to mix tea, coffee, sherbet, lemonade, eggnog, artillery punch, fizzerine, and straight goods, until the Happy New Year looked like a scrambled rainbow, and the last caller was sozzled to the ears. Old Tobe used to go out every New Year's Day to meet the good lookers and fuss around with them, for those were his salad days. He made it a combination salad, and philandered about a bit, about 7 years before he took the big risk and bought a home with a mortgage attachment, and finally settled down. And then the Happy New Year's began to have an entirely new meaning. He drew a red mark around January 1st, for that was the day when he had to make the books balance and take up some big note that was hanging over him like a storm cloud. His usual plan for celebrating the Happy New Year was to sit in his office, figuring on how to trim the payroll and sneak up on selling prices and keep out of the sheriff's hands for another 12 months. But, as it comes to some men, the time came when Tobias could take out a pencil on December 31st and compute a net profit big enough to fill a furniture van. To all intents and purposes, he had come to the high ground where he could now afford to sit down for a while, by George, and enjoy the scenery. He certainly possessed all the accessories of a Happy New Year. He had a bankroll, a house on the boulevard, and a wife who was slowly but surely worming her way into society. He had a son attending a high-priced university in the East and gradually accumulating a phony Oxford accent, while his daughter was at a school which used the French novel as its textbook. So, after all these years of struggling, Tobias knew what it was to have a genuinely Happy New Year. For when the children came home for the holiday vacation, the busy Mrs. Tobias gave a big dancing party on New Year's Eve, to say nothing of a couple of luncheons and a formal dinner. At these glittering functions, the family did what it could to keep Tobias in the background. For while he was a corker when it came to doing a fountain pen specialty with a checkbook, he was a frosted turnip when chucked into a suit costing $100 and put down in a Marie Antoinette apartment with a lot of Chaunceys who had been educated in the East. He celebrated the glad New Year by standing around in doorways and looking mournfully at the lightweights who were doing the cotillion, and each of them having the time of his life. He saw his wife hobnobbing with a human pickerel whose only excuse for being on earth was that he looked well in evening clothes. Daughter was dancing with a lovely specimen of the night-blooming rounder, and son was out passing cigarettes around, and no one was paying any attention to the provider. So he made a quiet retreat to his own room and had a glass of milk sent up and read the market report and managed to put in a pleasant evening after all, seeing the old one out and the new one in. Do you want to hear the greatest moral of all? Just bring that music in, don't leave it go. The greatest moral of them all. This is George Ade's moral to his fable. Moral: one new year is just about as happy as another. How's that for realism? And that came out in 1899, and that was the year that everybody was looking forward to the great, fantastic moment when 1900 would come in, that would usher in World War I, that would usher in World War II, that would usher in the Korean War, that would usher in the atom bomb. Oh, wow, man. Do you want to hear another one now? You hear it? All right, I've got another one here. This one is about prophecies. And this is written by another American writer. All these are American writers and what they've said about New Year's. And of course, one of the big things that you read every time the new year comes in, I'm sure there's going to be 25 magazine articles, if not entire magazines, published on the premise of forecasts of 1966, predictions of things to come by all the experts. Oh, man, you know. And this is a big hoopla. And wouldn't it be great to be an expert? Have people call you up. Oh, what do you think of 1966, Charlie? What's it going to look like? Well, the way I see 1966 is, it's going to have well over 360 days. I figure that the sun's going to be coming out a lot. I figure also we'll possibly have some rain. Now, we may not have, and this is, you can quote me on this, I know it's going to get a lot of people sore, we may not have as much as some people think. But on the other hand, and you know who I'm talking about, we're going to have a heck of a lot more than a lot of guys think. Right. Now, there's going to be other things, too. There's going to be a lot of guys having fist fights. I predict also that we're going to have several very hot days. Yes, put me down for that. Mm-hmm. And I predict that around the end of the year, there will be a little snow. Yes. Uh-huh. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, the great generalities that go clattering down through history. And I can already see it's practically in type now. The magazine's predicting. How much time do we have? The magazine's predicting predicting the future. And almost all of them, of course, are filled with that kind of generality. The world is going to be brighter in some quarters next year. We feel that the civil rights fight will continue to make headway. There will be, of course, a continuing battle against that. I could just see it already, I could see it. Certain areas of our economy will boom beyond all expectation, while others will sag unaccountably. And the great generalities where you're covered from all ends, and then at the end of the year you can turn back and look. There will be a certain amount of violence in 1966. However, in certain quarters, violence will be on the downgrade, and people will be more inclined to discuss their problems. So you're covered on both ends. That's known as the open-ended cop-out, which is the main product of prophesiers of one kind or another, whether they look at the crystal balls or whatever it might be. Have you noticed that no matter how many years we live on this planet, there are people who are always willing and able and delighted to believe a swami? Have you noticed all this hoopla? I hope the next year, if I hope anything else, we'll see no more articles about ladies who foresee the future by looking at the crystal balls in magazines that purport to be serious about anything. The serious. I hope I see. But of course, we will see that. There will be another lady who will be able to tell whether or not the president is going to sign the bill or whether it's going to be the end of the war by looking at the fur on a caterpillar, and she will make her statements and people will take her seriously. All right, give me a little rotten low-down music. This is a guy writing in the 1920s, which was a period of uncommon reality. It was a period, yes, it was. It was, strangely enough. On the one hand, I think the 20s are fascinating, literarily speaking, because on the one hand, you had this wild, fantastic growth of the Rotarian-type Babbitt, the optimist, the Lions Clubs. All this stuff was really booming in the 20s. And on the other hand, you had a strange undercurrent, maybe perhaps as a kind of a counter-irritant to the Babbittry that was extant. You had a peculiar kind of reality that you don't really see much today in writing. And this is an example of it. This was a little poem that appeared in one of the New York papers, I believe it was the New York World, in the 1920s, written by Archie the cockroach, who was a little cockroach who had been a poet in his previous incarnation and was now a working cockroach in the city room of this newspaper. He worked for his boss, Don Marquis, and he would come in every night and bang out these little poems on the typewriter of Mr. Marquis using his head, and because of that, he could not use capital letters, which put him right in the league with E.E. Cummings. All right, now would you please bring me a little rotten, low-down music? This is what Archie the cockroach said a couple of days before New Year's, right in the middle of the wild, exuberant 1920s, when everyone was predicting that just around the corner there would be a fantastic rainbow and there would be a moon in everyone's garage. The papers are full of the prophecies of preachers, professors, and laymen, to the effect that this human civilization is on the way up. And it looks to an insect such as I, Archie, very possible. The only thing I wonder about is why the human species calls it a civilization. Human society has never been as well organized as a hill of ants. That's a fact, boss. Or a hive of bees. And all the ancient sites of civilization are now, and listen to this, boss, in the possession of insects. I repeat, all the ancient sites of civilization, boss, are now in the possession of insects, who are far superior in organization, and I might also say in their ethical practices. Spiders bite the mummified feet of the pharaohs of Egypt right now, this minute. And the kings of Babylon are covered with fleas, which they are, and listen to this, too defunct to feel. Archie the Cockroach. Oh, one thing else, boss, about them prophecies. I wouldn't take them too seriously, boss. That is a message from Archie the Cockroach, from the pen of Don Marquis in the middle of the 1920s. And I can reiterate that. I likewise feel, oh, friends and neighbors, fellow denizens of this little pond known as the 20th century, don't take them prophecies too serious. Don't take yourself too serious, friend. You may live to see another one, if you don't. But then again, there's no guarantee of that either, is there? How about this other one? What do you think it's going to be like, huh? Is it going to be any different than the last one? Is your knee going to get better? Are you going to finally straighten up and lose weight and get a flat stomach and write that fantastic epic poem about man's inhumanity to man? Are you going to finally learn how to play the guitar? Huh? Are you going to reach that high road, that plateau? As George Ade put it, the high ground, where you can sit back on your oars and look around and say, this is it, Vil, man? Or is it just going to go dragging along? About the middle of January, you'll already forget that it's a new year. That sounds a little more like the correct and true prophecy. I repeat, by the middle of January, you'll look around and forget that it's a new year. Rasmataz and the Brody toot. Ba 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 ba. Oh, New Year's come, and New Year's I say go. But all along, baby, we just keep dragging our New Year's behind us. It ain't no end, ain't no turning around, baby. No going back. Ba 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 ba. Oh, I was gonna sleep in the kitchen with my feet in the hall and drink mighty water to celebrate the new one coming in. So, hail and farewell 1965. Yes, sirree. Good night, sweet. Good night, sweet prince. 1965's Bill gone and lost. Ba 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 ba. Hooray for 1966, dead man. All the way. Ba 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 do 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 da da. Oh, I seen him come. I seen him go. But this one looks mighty good to me. Pa-pa-ta. Oh, man. So, keep your knees loose and keep your eye on that bouncing ball. Be sure to keep a stock of neat's foot oil on hand. You never know when they might smack one out in your direction. You got to have the old glove oiled up. Maybe the Mets will go all the way this year. Who knows? Maybe Joe Pepitone will come through. Who knows? Maybe Shepard will come through this year. Who knows? Maybe you'll come through this year. Who knows? Hail and farewell. Hail and farewell. We will see you tomorrow night at the old Limelight. At the old Limelight.